Hello everyone, this is Ig Arthur, or E.G. Arthur if you prefer, and this is my Midsummer 2024 Booze Run update, which I'm subtitling as a 24-minute run. What you'll actually see here in the video, in the run-through part of the video, is a run that clocks in at 24 minutes and 12 seconds, but I still feel justified in calling it a 24-minute run because essentially the same route with less optimization has been run in less than 24 minutes. I've run it a very similar route in 23 minutes and 40 seconds. The reason that I'm not putting that route here is because I think this route has more potential to be even faster than 23 minutes and 40 seconds. I was not able to actually accomplish that because I ran out of days in the festival. In fact, I recorded this on the very last day of the festival. If I had more time to work on it, I probably could get it to be less. And when I say work on it, I mean the run was very much affected by lag. The only character I have available that has all of the ports to be able to do this run is on Evernight. So running this on Evernight, which is a very laggy server under the best of times, on the very last day of the festival, I encountered a lot of lag. And I haven't done a frame-by-frame comparison between the 23-minute and 40-second version and the 24-minute 12-second version to see where I lost time, but I'm pretty sure I lost time simply because of lag, because I didn't see any major mistakes or flaws in how I executed the run, so I think it was just a matter of lag. So if I had the luxury of doing this through the next week or two of festival, and perhaps picking times of the day where the server is less populated and people aren't rushing around trying to finish up their festival quests, then I think I could probably get it to close to 23 minutes. And that's why I'm showing this version and calling it a 24-minute version, even though it's slightly more than 24 minutes. So in terms of the structure of this video, I'm starting with the intro, which is what I'm in right now. And most of the intro is going to be focused on talking about constraints, the constraints that apply to this run, which I label the hardcore set of constraints. And I'll get into that shortly, but there is a reason that I spend so much time talking about constraints, but I'll get into that. After the constraints, I'll actually do the run itself. If you don't care to hear about the constraints, you could just skip to that part and just watch the run. The segment of the video that shows the run is actually going to be less than 24 minutes because I'm going to speed up some of the video over the more boring parts where I don't really have any commentary. If you want to see what the elapsed real time is in that part of the video, I do have a stopwatch plugin that was running. So there is a stopwatch in the lower right-hand corner. And so you can see what the elapsed real time is, even if I speed up or potentially even slow down the video, you'll be able to see what the actual real time is. And you'll see that it ends up at 24 minutes and 12 seconds. After the run itself, then I'll talk a little bit more about constraints, but the constraints I'll talk about after the run are constraints that don't apply to the run that you just saw. Rather, they apply to other runs that I've done, other routes that I've developed, and my purpose for talking about them is to try and inspire some people to come up with better routes and better ideas about how to do routes under that set of constraints. I mean, that invitation is open for all, including the hardcore set. But in terms of how much time and effort I've put into optimizing the hardcore set, I think it's probably much better optimized than the other sets of constraints. But I'll talk about those other sets and perhaps get people interested in doing the runs that way and perhaps coming up with better routes and better timings than I have. And then at the very end of the video, I have a blooper clip. As I mentioned, the run that you'll see displayed in the video in the second section is something that I did on the very last day of the festival, today being the last day of the festival. But what you'll see in the blooper clip is my attempt from the previous day, the second to last day. And what happened was a very unfortunate event, which pretty much screwed up the entire run. I also ran into some very, very serious lag later on, lag to the point where I couldn't even move for an extended period of time. So that run ended up being over 26 minutes, which was rather pointless to publish. So I'm just going to put some bloopers there. Maybe someone will get a chuckle out of it. But it's basically Murphy's Law, and you'll see it in that section. All right, so to continue the intro, I'm going to talk about constraints. And before I even talk about them, let me try and explain why I focus so much on constraints. And it's not because of an ego trip. I'm not trying to imply that because I put all these constraints on myself and still come up with a decent time, that makes me an awesome min-max, sweaty kind of player. The reason for having these constraints is accessibility. By constraining what players can or cannot do, I'm making this booze run accessible to almost anyone. I do assume that you have Swift travel. So, I mean, there are going to be some free-to-play players that aren't going to be able to do this run as I present it here. But for the most part, I'm trying to make it accessible to a broad range of players. Not everybody can afford to reduce the cooldown on their travel skills to 5 minutes. Not everybody can afford multiple milestones. Not everybody can afford to buy travel skills from the store. You know, there's lots of constraints that people have in real life in terms of their time or their money that prevent them from benefiting the run speed of a booze run. So in order to make it accessible to those folks that can't afford all those other things, then I put this set of constraints here. The hardcore set of constraints, which is the set that applies to the video, the run part of the video, pretty much makes this accessible to the most number of people. The other sets of constraints assume that you have bought various things, you purchased various things, and it's available only to a much smaller set. So, of these different sets of constraints, I do have a core set of constraints that apply to all of them. So I'll go through the core set. Just bear in mind, these are the constraints that apply to all of the sets. So if you watch the appendix where I go over some of the other constraint sets, these core constraints apply to them also. So the first core constraint is that it's solo. I forbid anything that involves the coordinated action between characters on different accounts. Now, notice the wording there. I'm not making a distinction here between multi-boxing or doing stuff with your friends. But if it's coordinated action between characters on different accounts, then it's not allowed. Accidents, a reasonable number of accidents are allowed. And the most typical one would be if you're making your way towards a doorway, and then someone from the other side comes through, opens the door, so you just have a portal that you can pass through. You don't have to click on the door to open it. That saves you a fraction of a second. I don't really have a problem with that. As long as it's completely accidental and you didn't coordinate that to happen, that's not a problem. But if it's a coordinated action, then it's not allowable. By the way, this also forbids the use of maps to hobnanigans, because hobnanigans is inherently an activity that requires coordinated action between characters on different account. I have heard people say that there is a way that you can essentially exploit hobnanigans to be able to run it solo, but I'm not going to consider anything that's an exploit either. So I'm forbidding any hobnanigans maps in any of the constraint sets. In terms of travel skills, I don't allow any travel skills that are class-specific or race-specific. Again, this is about accessibility. I don't want to present a run that only works well for hunters or wardens or bjornings or anything like that. I want to make it class-agnostic and race-agnostic. I do want to clarify that even though the Return to Bree and the Return to Thorin's Gate skills can be acquired as racial skills, they can also, since they can also be acquired as non-racial skills, they are not forbidden by this constraint. So feel free to use Return to Bree or Return to Thorin's Gate regardless of how you got that skill. Speed enhancing or preserving buffs. Again, I'm not going to allow anything that is exclusive to a race or a class. So no run speed buffs from hunters or wardens or any class that has like a sprint type capability. It has to be class agnostic and race agnostic. An example of a speed preserving buff is like a burglar's safe fall, which protects you from getting the so-called broken ankles or broken legs, which slow you down. So it's not that it speeds you up, but it protects you from being slowed down. And so that falls into the same category, and I don't allow any of those which are race-specific or class-specific. All right, so now let's talk about the constraints that are specific to the set, which I call the hardcore set. And that's what applies to the run that you'll see in the next section of this video. This is a wall of text here. I'll try to make it get through it as quickly as possible, but here we go. So for travel skills, the only ones that are allowed are the reputation-based ones, milestone, and homestead ports. And additionally, each of the reputation-based ports can only be used once in the course of a run. So, for instance, if you have a Return to Bree that you got through reputation, or as a racial, again, you can mix and match those, then you can only use that once. That doesn't bar you from using other Return to skills that you got through reputation or alternatively as a racial skill. But you can only use that particular one once. Now, for milestones, even though the different milestones that you buy from the store have different names to them, like milestone skill 1, 2, 3, etc., you can only use any milestone skill once in the course of a run. No matter how many milestones you have, you can only use one milestone skill once in the course of a run. For homestead skills, there are 4 different varieties. You can port to a classic house, personal house, classic. You can port to a personal house, which is a premium house. You can port to a kin house, or you can port to a kin member's house. So there are 4 different varieties, but you can only use any homestead port once in the course of a run. So the idea is you would pick the one that's closest to the stable master. You'll notice that when I talked about travel skills, one thing I didn't mention thus far is cooldown reduction. Are they allowed or aren't they allowed? Well, if you think about it, it doesn't matter. If you can only use the skill once in the course of a run, it doesn't matter whether your cooldown is 1 hour, which is the default, or 30 minutes or 5 minutes. You can only use it once, so the cooldown doesn't matter. So that's all I'll say about that. So for mithril coin purchases, under the hardcore set of constraints, No benefits which require mithril coins are allowed, and that applies to spending mithril coin in the course of a run. It also applies to mithril coin purchases prior to the run, which give you some sort of benefit which you could use in the run. So what I'm specifically targeting there is the Lalia's Market Port. The only way to acquire that is to barter for it with mithril coin. And then hypothetically, you could use it as part of a booze run. But because it is a mithril coin required benefit, then it is disallowed by the hardcore set of constraints. I do want to clarify that even though you can buy a premium house with mithril coin, you don't have to buy a premium house with mithril coin. You could buy it instead with housing writs. So the traveling to a personal house that happens to be a premium house, or for that matter, a kin house, which is a premium house, those are perfectly allowable because you can buy those houses for in a way that doesn't require mithril coin. And to be honest, the premium houses on average tend to be further away from the stable masters anyway, so there often isn't much of a benefit to using a premium house. But you can if you want to. It's up to you. It's allowed under the set of constraints. So for speed enhancing and preserving buffs, I've already ruled out in my core constraints any of those that are race specific or class specific. But in addition, under the hardcore set of constraints, you're not allowed any of those buffs from gear or from consumables either. Certain items of gear give you a run speed bonus. Those are disallowed under the hardcore set of constraints. Obviously, things like run speed coffee are also disallowed because that's a consumable. Now, just one note about the dash mounted combat skill for light war steeds. I do allow that, even though it shows up as a buff when it's in effect. Because the way I look at it, you're executing a skill to get the speed increase, and the fact that it shows up as a buff is merely a side effect. It's not really the buff that's giving you. I mean, maybe that's not technically accurate, but that's the way I view it. And to be honest, the dash skill doesn't really help that much anyway, because in the vast majority of where you go for a booze run, you can't use mounted combat skills anyway. And the only tiny little section where that is available in the course of this run, which is the Björninghus area, it really doesn't save you much. A fraction of a second at most. As you'll see in this run, it may have actually caused me problems because shortly after I executed the dash, I got some horrible rubber banding that I had to recover from. So it may have actually cost me time rather than saving me time. So sure, you can go ahead and use it, but I don't think it really helped you that much. So if you want to skip it, go ahead. In terms of travel maps, I don't allow any travel maps other than ones that are acquired from the festival system itself. And my reasoning there is that when you're doing a booze run, then by definition, you are engaging with the festival system of the game. And therefore, I don't see it as reducing accessibility in any way to say that if you want to, if you find it advantageous, you can divert some of the tokens that you are earning through doing booze runs, investing those in items which then benefit future booze runs. Now, in 2022, I put out a video called Treebeard and Waith Hardcore. Not a very good title. I apologize for that. I couldn't think of anything better. But at the end of that, I have a little appendix which shows me noodling around on a spreadsheet, doing a microeconomic analysis of whether it makes sense to spend time to ultimately save time. In other words, to spend time to acquire tokens, to use the tokens to barter for maps, and then using the maps to speed up future runs. And the bottom line is that it does save a little bit, depending on some various parameters. If you're using the Faithful Toolkit, it saves you a whole lot because your token acquisition rate goes up tremendously in that case. But in addition to anniversary maps, it has come to my realization that it's possible that the Yule Festival maps may actually be a better investment. The Yule Festival maps don't save quite as much time as the anniversary maps. However, they are cheaper. If you're doing the pipeline of doing booze runs to get in-league and Ale Association tokens, which you then barter for festival boxes, then opening the festival boxes to get festival tokens, then you get 12 Yule Festival tokens per box. You only get 6 anniversary tokens. So while the cost of the maps is the same, it's 1 token each, the ultimate cost in time is actually less because you can buy 12 maps with a single box of festival tokens from Yule, but you can only get 6 anniversary maps for a box. So I do need to double check a couple things once the festival is over. I need to check that you can still use those maps to go to Winterhome after the festival is over, and B, that if you do get to Winterhome, that there is actually a stablemaster there. I have not confirmed those things, and I cannot confirm them right now because the festival is still in progress. So, but Yule may be a better option than anniversary maps, and I will put my findings of those tests after the festival is over into the description of the video. So those are the constraints. This page here is something that I call anti-constraints. I've never put up a slide like this before in any of my videos, even though I've talked a lot about constraints. My general assumption has been that everybody would understand that anything that is unconstrained is allowable. If it's not listed under one of the constraints as being forbidden, that is something that is permissible to use as part of the run, and still be able to call it hardcore. But it occurs to me that maybe some things are not completely obvious in that respect. So here's a bunch of anti-constraints. In other words, things that are explicitly allowed or assumed. So swift travel, the unlock of swift travel is assumed. You get that either by being VIP at the time that you do the run, or that character existed while the account was in VIP status previously. So either of those conditions will unlock swift travel or make swift travel available, and I'm assuming that you do that. I can't imagine doing a booze run without swift travel. I've never tried that experiment, never contemplated that experiment, so I'm just going to assume it here, and that is assumed for all the constraint sets. Another thing I'm assuming for this in this particular run is that you use a war steed. I'm assuming that, but of course, many people simply cannot get a war steed because they're not high enough level. There is a level window, a level range between where it becomes practical to do booze runs, which is in the 40s or 50s, and when you can get a war steed, which is level 71. So if someone falls within that gap, they simply can't get a war steed. Even if they're eligible to get a war steed, they may not have done the quest line yet. Or even if they have access to a war steed, a lot of folks just simply don't like using war steeds. And I can understand why. They're hard to maneuver. They are more subject to rubber banding, etc. So if you don't use a war steed or can't use a war steed, then your run is going to be a little longer. It's likely to be longer, so you just have to adjust for that and accept that. You can still get a pretty fast run, though, out of this route without using a war steed. The impact of using a war steed or not using war steed is actually less than you might expect at first, because when you get right down to it, a lot of the time in this run is spent either indoors in places where mounts aren't allowed. It's taking taxi rides between various locations, or it consists of clicking on NPCs. And in some cases, the NPCs have forced delays of a few seconds where they make you wait until you can progress the quest. So most of the time is taken up in situations and scenarios where you can't actually use a war steed. Even when you can use a war steed, if it's a very short run, remember that war steed takes a while to accelerate. If there are a lot of turns, you have to slow down for the turns on a war steed. So the impact of using a war steed isn't as much as you might think. There are a few long stretches where a war steed is very beneficial. Some of them that come to mind are going up to Othrakar in the North Downs. You can save quite a bit of time by using a war steed. Another one is when you go up to the NPC in Edhelion in Thorin's Gate area. That one is greatly benefited by using a war steed. And the one that most applies is when you go down from Ostgaruth to Osther, which in my route is the very last stop. That is greatly benefited by being on a war steed. So yes, a war steed will save you time, but maybe not quite as much time as you might expect. So with regard to homestead ports, I'm assuming that you have at least one of those available to you of the 4 different varieties available. Even if you're not in Akin, which eliminates 2 flavors of port, you still have your choice of 2 different kinds of port, either a classic house personal port or a personal premium house port. Just about anybody who's level 15 can get a classic house. So if you're in the range to be doing booze runs, that is available to you. And the cost to maintain one is really not that much. I maintain houses on all servers, so I'm very familiar with of what it takes to keep and maintain a house. Even if that's the only character I have on the server and it's not very high level. And last but not least, one of the anti-constraints that should be pretty obvious, which is that ports that you acquire by accumulating a certain amount of standing with a reputation faction, and in most cases also accumulating some barter currency to be able to barter for the port. Those are completely allowable under the hardcore set of constraints. The Ostgaruth port is an example of one where you only need reputation. You don't need to barter. You just get it automatically when you hit Kindred. I think all the others require barter. But and some of them take quite a bit of effort to acquire. But if you have it, then it is allowable in the course of this run. The next page here is just a relatively simple comparison grid between the different constraint sets that I've talked about. And I'm just going to highlight some of the major differences, the defining differences between the different sets. The 4 sets are listed on the left column there. We have the hardcore set, which is the one that you'll see in the run-through part of this video. And I have in the past managed to get that less than 24 minutes. This one you'll see here is slightly more than 24 minutes. The whale set of constraints, where you've purchased a bunch of things, what that adds is the ability to use travel skills more than once. Now, the assumption here is that you have also reduced your travel cooldown, your travel skill cooldown to 5 minutes. Because if you haven't reduced it to 5 minutes, then there isn't much use in being able to use it more than once, right? The whole run is less than 30 minutes. So if your cooldown is 30 minutes, then obviously that's not going to be useful to you. So the assumption is you have multiple milestones, you have multiple homestead ports from which to choose, and that your cooldown for your travel skills is 5 minutes. So the whale version, the whale set of constraints, I've managed to develop a run that can be done in less than 19 minutes. So that's a 5-minute improvement over the hardcore set of constraints. The great whale constraint set not only allows you to use travel skills more than once, but also allows you to use mithril coin to travel to stable masters. And in fact, that is really the only way that you get to a stable master in the course of that run. You just simply spend some mithril and you pop over there. And that radically changes the nature of the run, because now instead of trying to develop pathing algorithms and such to go from here to run over to this stable master, from that stable master to this stable master to another stable master, you just simply spend mithril and go directly to the stable master that's closest to the NPC that you want to get to. So then the challenge becomes, how close are those stable masters to those NPCs? And also, how close are the milestones? Because in some cases, the milestone will be closer, in which case you'll want to use the milestone to get to the NPC. In other cases, the stable master will be closer, and you'll want to use the stable master. But the milestones, even with all the upgrades that you can possibly get from the game, still have a 5-minute cooldown, so you can only use at maximum 3 of them in the course of a great whale run. Because I can do the great whale run in less than 12 minutes. So, for instance, if I used a milestone at the 1-minute mark, the 6-minute mark, and the 11-minute mark, that's all that I can use, because the run is over by then. I don't get to use a 4th or 5th milestone. And finally, the white whale set of constraints essentially amounts to no constraints whatsoever. Not only can you use travel skills more than once, not only can you use mithril coin to travel to a stable master, you wouldn't do either of those things, because what you would do instead is you would use mithril coin to travel to the quest objective. You would just hop from one NPC to another NPC to another NPC. There's really no innovation or creativity or ingenuity to be applied here. It really just boils down to how fast can you click on the button, on the mithril coin button, and on the NPC, and that's it. And that one, I haven't done it myself in 5 minutes, but Lil Redhead, who also publishes videos on this topic and streams, she did a demo on a Bull Roar, the test server where mithril is free, and she did it in 5 minutes. But as I said, it's kind of just a joke or a gimmick, because there really is no route per se. There's nothing to be developed in terms of optimizing how to get from point A to point B, because you just click through. All right, so that's the end of the intro. Without further ado, I'm going to start the run. All right, so let's start the run here. And I'm starting my timer in the lower right-hand corner there, a little plugin called CTime. And the run starts in the Thorin's Hall Inn. You'll notice I'm on a regular mount. The reason for that is the space is so confined here that I don't get any benefit from using a war steed. They did relax the restrictions, so you can use a war steed in here. But for this little jog here, there's really no point in using a war steed. This is the only point in the run when I use a mount other than a war steed. I'll switch once I get outside. But I just don't see the point of using a war steed in there. It would be more trouble than it's worth. All right, so I pick up all of the Ale Association quests. And then, if you were watching closely, you'll notice that the quest, which is called a drink of the best character, I lock that one in my quest tracker. And the reason I lock it, as you'll see later, is because when I get to that point, I want to make sure it's in my quest tracker so that I will get a quest arrow on my minimap, on my radar, which will help guide me. And I'll mention that when I get up to that point. But that's the reason I lock that. I don't lock any other of the other quests, but just that one. All right, so from Thorin's Hall, I ride down to Thorin's Gate, to the stablemaster, take the stablemaster to West Bree, and now I'm on my way to the Prancing Pony. In the Prancing Pony, I do 2 pickups, Never Further From Home, and A Drink Too Few. Head back out. And now I'm going to mount up and take the free portal to the Bree-land Festival Grounds. My destination here is Thornley's Worksite. All right, so here's my first delivery. Never Further From Home, then do Never Far From Home. And my first port is to Herne in Cardolan. From Herne, I take the swift travel to Inn of the Forsaken. This is the newest port, the one they added with Before the Shadow. And I rearranged my route in kind of a ripple effect when they added this, because previously I was porting to Oscaruth and then taking some swift travels to get to the Inn of the Forsaken. Now, if you're on a war steed, it can be a little bit challenging to make the turn precisely so you go up the stairs to the Inn of the Forsaken. But what I've found is, and you'll see here, if you get stuck next to the stairs, you're still close enough that you can still click on the door, open it, and then kind of launch yourself toward the portal and still make it through. So you don't need to be super sweaty about making sure that you hit the stairs at exactly the right angle, because even if you miss it by a little bit, you can still get through pretty quickly. All right, so do the pickup there in the Inn of the Forsaken. My next port is to Nobottle. This is a port that you need reputation and some currency to procure, but you can do that in 15 minutes work. The purpose of going to Nobottle is really just as a jumping off point to head towards Duillond, but I'm not actually going to go all the way into Duillond. Instead, I'm going to interrupt that swift travel and then ride on my war steed up to Thrasi's lodge. For this section, you should have, depending on the exact order in which you picked up the quest, you should have a quest marker on your minimap to show you what direction to go in order to get to the NPC. Click on the NPC here. This is one of the interactions where there's a forced delay. You have to wait in order to advance the quest. There's also a delay when you finish the in-league quest before it actually auto-completes and then you get your tokens. While that's happening, I'm going to port to my personal house. Remember, I can only use one homestead's port in the course of the run, and I just used it right here. The purpose of going to my personal house is to take a swift travel to Michel Delving. And this is another case where as soon as I resolve in, I'm going to interrupt. I don't want to go all the way to the stablemaster. Mount up, take my war steed, and head into the Bird and Baby Inn. Do the pickup here for A Convoluted Wine. Back out again, mount up, head down to the stablemaster, and then take the swift travel to Hobbiton. Now, one thing you'll notice is that instead of scrolling through the list, I actually do a type ahead and select Hobbiton that way. I find it to be a little bit more reliable to do that than to scroll because it's a pretty long list. And sometimes I overshoot and then I'm scrolling up and down. I'd rather just type in HOBB, and that focuses on just the Hobbiton routes. And then I can click the Swift Travel version and off I go. Now I head into the Ivy Bush Inn, do the pickup there for a bit of white. Back out, mount up. Now, if you were watching closely, you saw the message come up, you cannot mount here. There's a little bit of a delicate timing there. I usually click on my mount key, which I have bound to the letter X, as I'm opening that door portal so that I can be mounting in parallel with getting through the portal. But if your timing is just a little off, if it's a little too early, then it thinks you're trying to mount inside. Sometimes your timing is a little off in the other direction. If you're a little late, then sometimes it doesn't even see your mount command. And so you get through the portal and you're not mounting, and then you'll have to do your mount command there. All right, so I picked up a couple of quests there in the Green Dragon. Now, I got a little disoriented there. I was thinking ahead, and I thought I was in Frogborden, where I exit to the right. And then I suddenly quickly realized, that I was actually still in Bywater. So I kind of went the long way around the Green Dragon in order to start my journey to the Floating Log Inn. I don't think I lost a lot of time there, but that was not my finest moment. All right, so pick up a dark prank in the Floating Log Inn. Now I turn left and head up towards the Plough and Stars in Brockenborings. Now, here is the whole reason why I locked that quest in my quest tracker, so that I could guarantee that it would be displaying on the minimap. And you see I have a nice quest marker on my minimap that I can follow so I don't drift too far to the east or the west and lose time. You could also use, if you wanted to, you could also use the Waypoint plugin, which gives you a nice little marker that you can click to update. But I find this to be at least as useful as the Waypoint plugin. Now, at this point, I like to do a checkpoint and make sure that of the quests that I have, of the booze delivery quests that I have, I only have 2 more pickups to make. I have the one here, and I have the one in Rivendell. So that's just a checkpoint, a sanity check to make sure that I didn't miss anything up to this point. All right, so I've picked up the fake booze for a drink of the best character. Now I'm going to head down to Foxglove Grub and do my interactions with her. All but the cider and all but the good cider. Take the swift travel up to Oakbarton. Mount up and ride over to Irrigar Mudbottom. And in those quests, and at this point I'm going to use my anniversary map. If you recall the whole discussion about whether it's worth it to use the anniversary map at this point, maybe you want to, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't have any anniversary maps because this is the first time that you're doing festivals and the anniversary festival's already passed. If you don't use the anniversary map, the alternate is to take Oakbarton to Ostforode and then take Ostforode to West Bree. So that's what you would do if you didn't want to, or you weren't able to use an anniversary map. From West Bree, I take the swift travel to Surikaila. And from Surikaila, I then take a swift travel to Zigulgund. What I've found is that interrupting the swift travel and riding into Zigulgund is a little faster than allowing the swift travel to resolve all the way into Zigulgund. It also has the additional advantage that if you do that, you're already mounted when you make your next stop or your next port, and therefore you don't have to spend the time mounting again when you go to the next stop. So it's kind of a double benefit. So now I interact here, a dark prank, a dark day, finish that up. Now I'm going to use a milestone, and my milestone is set to O'Hare. Remember, under this set of constraints, you can only use any milestone skill at all once in the course of the run. So my best choice here is O'Hare. I ride over and interact with the NPC. This is another one that has a forced delay. He's going to make you wait a while before you can click through. From here, I'm going to go to Bjorninghus. And that's an optimization of the route from here to Hrimbarg. If you don't use that optimization, your best route is to ride over to the O'Hare Stablemaster, from there to Rivendell, from Rivendell to Glowin's Camp, and from Glowin's Camp to Hrimbarg. Now, once in Bjorninghus, you see I use my dash ability, but I think it kind of screwed me up because I ended up bouncing around, rubber banding, having to recover. So I think it actually backfired on me to use dash in that particular case. Another thing that can happen in Bjorninghus is you use dash, but then it takes a while for the Stablemaster to load in. So essentially, in that case, your dash was wasted. From Bjorninghus, I take a swift travel to Vegbar, and from Vegbar, I'm going to take another swift travel to Hrimbarg. Interact with him. Not Atli's favorite, Atli's favorite. Not exactly sure why they're talking about Atli when this guy's name is Oli. My next port is the Tornhad port, and this is a relatively new port that you can acquire, the Angle of Mithril. And like the Yondershire port, you can get this in about 15 minutes of work if you follow a particular route. I may, at some point, publish a video explaining how to get the Yondershire ports, and the Yondershire and the Angle of Mithril port. You can get both of those in about 30 minutes of work. Both of those, as you can see, were useful in optimizing this run. So I highly recommend getting both of those ports. Now this particular segment here, you have to be careful going around these corners when you're on a war steed. You also have to be very careful that you stop in time, because if you head over that cliff, then basically you're not going to have a very good day. That's going to put a crimp in your style as far as doing the run. All right, so interact with a convoluted wine, simple wine, head back to the Stablemaster, and then take the Stablemaster to the last homely house. So there's only 3 more deliveries that need to be made, but there's before one of the deliveries can be made, you first have to do the pickup here in Rivendell. And even after you do that pickup, none of these deliveries are particularly fast. So even though I'm roughly at the 18.5-minute mark, it's still going to take me a while to get through the rest of the booze run. Okay, so finally, near the end of the run, that's my last pickup. I just have 3 deliveries left. I'm going to continue here by using my, in this case, it's a racial port, but it could also be a rep port to the west gate of Bree. And from there, I'm going to head towards Esteldon. This is another case where the type ahead is usually better, I find, than scrolling, because it's easy to miss when you're scrolling and have to scroll back and forth. As you head to Esteldon, interrupt that swift travel. You don't want to ride all the way into Esteldon and then take the taxi. Even if you're on a 62% mount, it's faster to interrupt that swift travel and then ride up. And it's even more beneficial, of course, on higher speed mounts like 68%, 78%, or a war steed. All right, so now deliver Bomber's Breath, a member in need. My next port is to Thorin's Gate. And we're a little over the 21-minute mark. We've got 2 deliveries to go. But as I mentioned, neither of these are fast. Thorin's Gate, need to make my way all the way up to Edhelion. On a war steed, it makes a lot more sense to head up the far ramp here than it is to try and make your way up the stairs. Because on a war steed, you're going to end up having to slow down and speed up and slow down and speed up. And there's also a good chance that you'll not hit the stairs at the right angle and end up falling down or getting stuck against a wall. So going up the ramp makes a lot more sense on a war steed. If you're using a regular mount, it's kind of more or less the same time either way, but on a war steed, you definitely want to go up the ramp, not up the stairs to get up here. All right, so now we're coming up on the 22.5-minute mark. And we have one more delivery, but it's a doozy. Port to Osgaruth and head all the way down to Osther. Now, this is one of the few, or perhaps the only delivery where I tend to use the map more than I use the quest marker on the minimap. And the reason for that is if you just follow the quest marker on the minimap, you end up basically going over a cliff and breaking your legs. If you look at the map, you can see like there's this triangular piece that juts out southwards pointing, and that's what you want to get on so that you can just gently go down here and not break your legs, or break your legs only minimally. If you just follow the quest marker, you're going to break your legs a lot, and you're going to be very slowed and lose a lot of time. Once you're on the ground level or the water level here, then you can follow the quest marker. But up to that point, I would definitely watch the map more than the quest marker. I should probably use more map to put a scaled down version of the map in one of the corners rather than flipping back and forth, but I didn't think of it until just now. So maybe next time I'll do it that way. And there we go. 24 minutes and 12 seconds. All right, now that the run has concluded, I'm going to start with the first appendix, which is where I talk about some of the other sets of constraints beyond the hardcore set of constraints that you saw applied in the run-through that just concluded. So if you're not interested in these other constraints, if you're not interested in trying this out, trying to beat my time, trying to a little friendly competition and collaboration, then you could conceivably skip this section. But first I'm going to talk about the whale anti-constraints. And by anti-constraints, again, I mean things that are allowed. This is relative to the hardcore set of constraints. So when you're doing a whale run, then the travel skill anti-constraints are that you can upgrade your travel skill cooldown as much as you want. In fact, it's assumed that your travel skills have a 5-minute cooldown, and you can use those travel skills, any travel skills that you have, as your own personal skills as often as you want. So you could use the same return to skill multiple times. You could use different or the same homestead ports, the same, once or multiple times. The only restriction is on the skills that require expenditure of mithril coin. Speaking of mithril coin, no real-time mithril coin purchases are allowed, even under the whale set of constraints. But if you have spent mithril coin previously, such as for the Lalia's Market port, then that is allowed. You can use the Lalia's Market port as part of the run, even though you use mithril to barter for it. You just can't use mithril coin during the course of the run. With respect to speed enhancing or preserving buffs, you can use any of those that you choose. Again, subject to the core constraints, which say that you can't use anything that is class-specific or race-specific. And then for travel maps, the constraints are the same as for the hardcore set of constraints, meaning you can't use any travel maps other than those that you can acquire from the festival system itself. And as I showed on the comparison matrix earlier, I have been able to do the run in less than 19 minutes under the whale set of constraints. For the great whale set, the anti-constraints are that you can use all travel skills other than the ones that are race-specific or class-specific. For mithril coin purchases, you can use mithril coin to travel other than traveling to quest objectives. So you can use mithril coin to travel from one stable master to another. You can use mithril coin to travel from anywhere in the world to a stable master from the collections map. All of those are allowed. The only thing that is prohibited is traveling to quest objective, because that just makes a mockery of the whole thing. Speed enhancing or preserving buffs, all of them are allowed, other than the ones that are prohibited by the core constraints, which are race-specific or class-specific. And all travel maps are allowed, including the store-bought ones. Like part of my Great Whale run involves using a travel map to Harloeg, Harloeg, to make the Ost-Hare delivery, thus saving myself a significant amount of time riding down from Ostgaruth. That is a very rare drop, a very rare world drop. I periodically scan the auction house. I've never seen one for sale. I think most people don't understand its value for booze running. But under this set of constraints, you would just be able to buy that from the store and use it as part of the run. Lastly is the white whale set of constraints, or more accurately, it's a lack of all constraints. The only constraints that are hypothetically applicable here are the core constraints, but practically speaking, none of the things that are prohibited by the core constraints actually help you here anyway, because as I've described before, the white whale run consists of just using the travel to quest objective to go to one NPC, clicking on that NPC, then traveling to the next quest objective at the next NPC, and so forth. There really is no optimization or pathing or any kind of creativity that's involved. It's really just a matter of clicking through and executing the run, which, as I've mentioned before, can be done in as little as 5 minutes. Okay, so now we get to the blooper part of this video. And this is the run that I attempted on the second to last day of the festival. And when I got to the part where I go to my personal house and the intention is to ride over from my house to the stable master and then take the stable master to Michel Delving. As you can see in the lower right-hand corner there, an alarm came up that said trash receptacle. Now, where I live, the trash pickup is on Mondays. And the only alarm that I have set in Windows is an alarm for 4:30 p.m. on Mondays to remind me to bring the trash bin back in from being on the curb. And it just so happened that that alarm went off when I was at this specific point in the booze run, and the alarm app took focus away from my my mouse just momentarily, but just long enough for me to lose control of my war steed, and I went diving off of the cliff. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the layout of the Thorn homesteads, but if you go over that cliff, the only way back up is to go all the way to the back of the homesteads and then make your way to the front of the homesteads again. So I lost a whole lot of time making my way back. And not only that, but I'm not very familiar with this route, so I took a few wrong turns and wasted a bunch of time. Now, later in the booze run, I also ran into some very serious lag, and I'll show it right here. Unable to move, unable to move, unable to move. You know, during those times, believe me, I was trying to do things, but unable to. Already in use, already in use, already in use. So yeah, between the mishap with the clock app and this terrible, terrible lag that I experienced in the Shire, there we go with the reduced awareness pop-up. Yeah, basically that run was a disaster. The ultimate runtime ended up being over 26 minutes, which obviously there was no point in publishing the full video when it's that bad, and so I just scrapped it. But I did keep these bloopers because I think maybe someone will get a chuckle out of it. So that's the end of the video. The expectation, my hope, is that next time a booze run is available, which will probably be the Farmers Fair Festival, I'll be able to do some more runs, and hopefully I won't have as much problem with lag, and I might be able to get it closer to 23 minutes. If there are changes to the game, of course, since it's always a moving target, maybe there will be even more optimizations that are available, and I'll be able to get it even lower than 23 minutes. And of course, everybody else is welcome to take some of the ideas here and maybe their own ideas and come up with a better run. I'd love to see someone do a faster, better run. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.